Meltdown. Written by Peter Millett. Illustrated by Leo Campos. 23rd of October, 21:48. This is my first ever journal entry, created using a ballpoint pen. If you're reading this text sometime in the future, I can guarantee that you'll have never used one before. They are more ancient than iPads, Bluetooth, or DVDs. My grandfather heard about them when he was a kid, but he'd never actually seen someone use one. He once said, "I can't believe that anybody would use something like that to record their thoughts, when simply speaking aloud is all you have to do." He was right. Pens are really slow and clumsy to use. So, why am I using an antique tool to write my journal entry? It's because it's one of the few things in the world that works right now. We've just suffered the biggest electrical meltdown in history, and everything digital has been rendered useless. I might be one of the only people in our megacity that's able to record what's going on. Currently, I'm sheltering inside the Museum of Technology. That's where I found the pen. Earth has been hit by a massive superflare from the sun, and we've been sent back to the Dark Ages, temporarily. My mother warned us this day might come. She told us we should avoid being so over-reliant on technology. She said that one day our survival might be at risk if we didn't learn to cope without it. I wish I'd listened to her more carefully. My brother Samir wishes he had listened too, but we didn't. And now that day has come and our survival is at risk, just as our mother said. For the record, my mother is a scientist who works at the Global Protection Agency. Her job is to forecast natural land and sea disasters. The technology she helped develop is so accurate that it can predict an earthquake down to the exact month and day. The technology is so reliable that natural disasters hardly hurt anybody anymore. However, no matter how cool Mum's inventions are, they can't stop random disasters from outer space happening. She often said that a massive eruption on the sun, one which occurs twice a millennium, was likely to devastate the Earth, years earlier than anybody would have ever expected. But no one took her seriously, especially not the president. Mum couldn't prove her theory because her sun monitoring satellites melted before they could fully transmit their data back to Earth. But Mum's gut instincts were right. She predicted the superflare would strike without warning, and it did just that, catching us all badly off guard. Our planet was bombarded with so much solar energy and radiation that we must have glowed like a tinfoil ball spinning inside an old-fashioned microwave oven. The timing of the superflare couldn't have been worse. I was 300 meters above the ground in my brother's hovercar when huge twisting, waving bands of green, red and purple streaked across the horizon. Our power cut out and we fell from the sky immediately. The only thing that saved us from being crushed to death was the hovercar's emergency parachute. Samir hurt his arm and I was bruised all up and down my back. But we were the lucky ones. Other craft fared much worse than us. I have no idea what happened to the jet airliner that was heading southwards when the flare struck. As soon as we crawled out from the wreckage, an out-of-control robot street cleaning truck veered off its path and ploughed into the back of Samir's craft, completely demolishing it. After 2 close calls, we managed to drag ourselves inside this deserted museum and we've decided to shelter here for the evening. It's cold in here, but it's even colder outside. We have no blankets, no torches and no food, but we are too tired to care. It's going to be a very long night. 24th of October, 21:48. Okay, we survived our first night alone, but it was extremely unsettling. Our city has 50 million people wondering helplessly about it. You don't know who to trust. Thieves are everywhere. Banks are being robbed, but no alarms are sounding. People just smash windows and walk off with hologram televisions and stereo equipment at will. I'm not sure what they'll plug them into, though. Anything with wires inside it has been short-circuited by the superflare. I assume they'll figure that out soon enough. Thankfully, no thieves disturbed the Museum of Technology overnight. There is nothing worth stealing inside here. We definitely picked a good, safe place to hide away. I miss my mum. Desperately. Normally she would have called me by now. She always has a plan to help me out if I find myself in trouble. But that call can't come. Samir and I have already thrown away our burned-out phones. I wish I hadn't misled Mum about what I was doing before the disaster hit. Samir was still on his learner's pilot license and wasn't allowed to take passengers with him, so I sneaked aboard his craft for a quick joyride over the megacity and hid my personal location tracker under my pillow to keep it a secret. Mum will be clueless as to my whereabouts. She will be so worried, wondering where we are. 1400 hours. I wanted to stay longer in the museum because it was such a safe place to hide, but we were seriously hungry and had no access to food. We were hoping someone would show us some kindness and offer us a free meal. Some people were stealing food. We weren't prepared to do that. As we walked away down the main street, the strange lights on the horizon began to glow more and more brightly. It looked like the sun's rays were being filtered through a giant shaking kaleidoscope. The whole surrounding area was a complete disaster zone. Transportive vehicles and cargo buses packed with heavy loads had ground to a halt in the middle of the road. Cars were on fire. People were lying about injured, and every single street sign had blanked out. We saw a few stressed-looking policemen running about, and one was even riding around on a horse. I suppose horsepower was the only type of transportation they could rely on after the massive power outage. We soon figured out why the policemen were looking stressed. The megacity was slowly filling with escaped zoo animals. A couple of giraffes galloped through a nearby park, and the chilling roar of roaming lions could be heard in the distance. The police ordered us to take cover while they tried to contain the chaos. We didn't hesitate to do so. For now, we're in a shopping mall, but how much protection they will give from the animals, I don't know. We soon forgot about being hungry when we found ourselves being stalked by a freshly escaped predator. We sheltered as best we could behind a loosely closed glass door in one of the shops, while a lioness outside banged the windows with her paws and let out a series of deep howls. The heat from her breath partially steamed up the glass frontage. A few seconds later, shots rang out, and the authorities felled her with 4 tranquilizer darts. Once the all-clear was given, we shuffled out of the door and then sprinted past her huge body lying on the concrete footpath. Her fangs were massive. I'd never seen a lion up close before, only lion holograms in my bedroom. The police said the zoo's electric fences had deactivated. Their backup diesel generators had failed as well. No surprise, really. Samir asked one of the police officers if he knew of anyone who could help us find our way home. "Sorry, son," the officer had replied. "We have 50 million other people also stuck and wanting to get home." He gave Samir a bottle of water. I was so tired and thirsty that I snatched it right out of his hands. Then I realised what I had done. I quickly apologised and handed it straight back. Lack of proper sleep and food was making me snappy. Samir is a kind brother, and he let me finish the bottle off after he'd gulped down a few large mouthfuls. It feels really weird to be here, abandoned in the middle of our megacity. Usually, if you want to go home, you just tell a personal travel pod where you want to go. Then it takes you there. Simple. You don't need to remember directions or understand travel systems. You just end up where you need to be, eventually, without having to move a muscle. We need to get home, but we don't know where home is. We're now sitting outside an abandoned cafe with no idea of which way to go. That's how unprepared we are for a catastrophic electronic meltdown. 25th of October, 21:48. We're just taking a break from walking and have crouched down in a shop doorway. I don't mind, as it gives me a chance to make sense of what is happening to us. One good thing is that we didn't immediately start thinking about food as soon as we stopped. We ate well last night. A generous elderly couple let us stay over with them in their apartment last night and gave us a delicious meal to eat. Long life pizza never tasted so good. I know my grandfather swore he'd never eat genetically modified food in his lifetime, but he'd probably never been as hungry as we were. Mum always has an emergency supply of genetically modified, long-life food in our kitchen, in case of unexpected events. So too did this old couple. They had lived through the megacity nuclear power station disaster of 2098. They know what it's like to survive without power for a few weeks. They are also old enough to remember the times when people used to grow their own food in the ground. That was before the acid rain started falling, 30 years ago. They said this current disaster is worse than any before it. All of the food we import from countries with safer environments is going to be stuck, rotting on ships that can't leave their ports, or on ships that are lost at sea without any power or navigation systems. We left the old couple's house a few hours ago and decided to try and find our way home by ourselves. Some of the larger corporate buildings have satellite dishes on them, and they all point in the same direction, south. Samir's flight navigation training is coming in really handy. He can follow landmarks for directions. Our apartment is located in the south of the city, so that's where we headed next. Hopefully Samir is right. To be honest, there aren't many other options for us to consider. We're certainly not planning on heading back to the heart of the megacity with wild animals on the loose. It's proving next to impossible to keep my thoughts about Mum in check. I'm worried that I will never be able to apologise enough for not letting her know where I was going. Samir says that simply turning up at our apartment in one piece is the best way to say sorry. He is probably right. Hopefully I'll get to do that. 1200 hours. In my last entry, I wrote how great it felt to have food in your belly. Well, that feeling disappeared pretty quickly, and walking 5 kilometres without stopping for a break is the main reason. Those few remaining calories of pizza were quickly burned up by our exhausted bodies. Everywhere I looked, people were scavenging for food. More windows were being smashed. Electrical goods aren't being targeted anymore. Thieves are now hunting for bread, fruit, juice, biscuits, and long-life meat. Everybody is starving. I suppose people are acting no differently to the escaped zoo animals, just following their primal survival instincts. It's unnerving to be stranded in the megacity. The place was never designed for people to wander aimlessly about it. Everything used to be programmed to perfection. Travel networks ran like clockwork. But those systems all collapsed pretty quickly once the clock stopped working. Everywhere we walked, the emergency services people were running around, trying their best to keep everyone calm, but none of their equipment is functional. There isn't much they can do, other than hand out bottles of water and offer encouragement. We've stopped for a rest in a small park, but even this is full of people looking worried. You can't get away from it. Amazingly, my pen is still functional. I'm not sure for how much longer, though. There's no digital readout telling me its exact expiry time. It's old-school technology, after all. 1400 hours. When you're tired, mistakes start to happen. Samir and I have just had a snippy argument about our directions. One of us got confused and we ended up walking around in a circle for more than 2 kilometers. More valuable calories were burned up needlessly. We were both pretty annoyed about it, but we were too tired to keep arguing about who should take the blame for being back on the same bench, having achieved nothing. Looking for our apartment, number 10,514, in the middle of a megacity, is like searching for a needle in a haystack. Lots of haystacks, actually. No street names or building numbers are electronically displayed. Every single apartment block layout looks exactly the same. Even if we manage to get close to the vicinity of the actual apartment, we won't necessarily know it. The bench we're sitting on could be 10 meters from our home or 10 kilometers. I can't believe that only 3 days ago we were planning a 55 million kilometer school trip to Mars. We were going to scale Olympus Mons and explore the Valles Marineris canyons. Now we'll be lucky if we can find our way back to our own apartment's doorstep. Thankfully, this morning we found a helpful solution to avoid the problem of walking around in circles again. My grandfather was a sailor, and he would have been proud of the navigation skills I displayed in the middle of our crisis of confidence. I remember he always said that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, so I matched the sun's position in the sky with the occasional satellite dish we encountered, and that gave us 3 points of the compass. I've also played a bit of tennis before, so I know that most courts face north to south to avoid the glare of the rising sun. We haven't seen any tennis courts yet, but we know if we do come across one, that will give us our north bearing as well. I think we are some of the few folk wandering about the megacity that at least have a clue about what direction we are heading in. Most people must be completely helpless without something electronic to guide them. 2100 hours. We pushed on for another 4 kilometers this afternoon, and our hopes of finding our home were steadily increasing. There was something familiar looking about where we were headed. We knew it must be in the right direction. There was something about the water features, trees, sculptures and artwork we passed that looked familiar. We've never walked to our apartment building at street level before, as normally we'd only leave and enter our apartment via travel pod or hovercar, but positive signs were definitely emerging. As night fell, we had to cut our exploration short. Tonight, we have chosen a gymnasium to shelter in. There is nothing worth stealing in here. Out the back of the gym, there's a large tennis court. It confirmed our north and south bearings were spot on. Things are definitely looking up now. 26th of October, 21:48. Last night, I slept for 2 hours max. Samir snored the whole night through. I kept hearing noises throughout the night. My mind raced wildly, wondering if it was another predator stalking us. Turns out, it was just a plastic bag blowing around some bushes. Whether from lack of sleep or low blood sugar, I couldn't walk this morning. There was no energy left in any of my cells. Samir was really annoyed with me. Lack of food was making him snappy as well. I feel it is all so hopeless. I want to go home. Fumbling around out there on foot could take us forever. I just lay down and stared at the ceiling. I told Samir to go without me, and he did. He's never done that before, and he still hasn't come back. I guess I just stay here until he returns. What other choice is there? 1600 hours. I was so relieved when Samir came back. He hadn't been gone long, but I had been so worried. He grabbed my arm and told me to follow him, so off we went. Just around the next corner, he started shouting excitedly and pointing frantically to show me some smoke signals in the distance. They were controlled smoke puffs appearing from the middle of a concrete building. A second later, we saw a flicker of darting light reflecting the sun's rays. Someone was trying to get our attention. I looked round and spotted a small, shiny piece of metal on the ground and used it to reflect the sun's rays back in the direction of the person signalling us. Samir thinks it could have been Mum. He says it looked like it was coming from the 10th floor of the building. Our apartment is on the 10th floor of our building. We have returned to the safety of the gym to plan what to do next. I want to believe Samir, but too many days without food and sleep have left me doubtful about many things. Samir says we must start going towards the flashing light. Maybe it was Mum, or maybe it was a complete stranger. Either way, we will have to find more energy to start walking again, and I'm not sure I can. 1800 hours. In the end, Samir convinced me that we had to go towards the light. It was our only hope. We walked for nearly 2 kilometers toward where we had seen the flashing light. I was really tired and so hungry, but hopeful that at last we would find Mum. Then, abruptly, my hopes vanished. It started pouring with heavy rain, toxic acid rain. Mum's weather satellites weren't there to warn us about this sort of danger anymore. We quickly dived into a hover bus shelter. The rain killed off the smoke signals and the mirror reflections as well. We are still here now, and are beyond deflated. Acid rain can pour for hours, and we have no chemical-resistant suits for protection. And what if that wasn't Mum signalling us? 2000 hours. We huddled in our shelter. The rain kept getting heavier and heavier. There was no way ahead for us. Our skin would have started burning after 10 minutes of exposure to it. Then we heard a familiar voice calling out from the distance. Samir! Mahira! I hugged my brother with relief. We hadn't been seeing things after all. The smoke signals were real. The mirror reflections were real. We have found our home, and now our mother had found us too. Our journey has come to an end. It is over. I am so glad to be home. 27th of October, 21:48. Last night, we had our first decent sleep for days. No thieves prowling about to keep us unsettled, no escaped predators to give us nightmares. Just Mum, Samir and me, together in our powerless house. Mum didn't even ask about my personal tracker being left hidden under my pillow. We'll probably never talk about it. There's no need to. We've been reunited and we will never be separated like that again. She only wanted to talk about how resourceful we had all been at overcoming the most challenging of problems in recent human history. I'm still processing what we went through in the megacity. Samir acts like everything's normal, but deep down, he knows it's not. Everyone processes stress differently, I guess. Hopefully, we'll never be in that situation again. And if we ever are, at least we'll be prepared for it. Epilogue. Journal entry. 23rd of March, 2149. My pen is about to run out of ink. It's getting harder to read the words. There are signs that our megacity may receive small pockets of regular power in the next few weeks. Everything is moving very slowly. We've all adjusted pretty well to living without power. We know our neighbours better, and we all work together better as a community. That's one good thing that has come from all of this. My mother is in charge of leading the global superflare recovery programme, and she is doing an amazing job. People are inspired by her vision for full global recovery one day. I'm sure we will eventually get back to normal and be far stronger for the experience. I hope my journal will always be there for future generations to read and learn from. Mahira.
Meltdown. When Mahira hid in her brother's hovercar, she couldn't have predicted the solar flare and the chaos the meltdown would bring. Can she find her way home?